Well, Robert, how about we try this one more time? Now, as you all know, my name is Alex Tarnava. I'm the CEO and founder of Drink HRW and the Up-a-Cup.hydrogen tablet technology. I'm here with a good friend, Robert Slovak. Funny enough, we already did this interview at Robert's house in California, but we're doing it again. We lost the file. Now, Robert, for those of you who don't know him, is a real pioneer in water technologies. He had a lot of the early patents on undersink and countertop RO technology with his deceased brother that they developed for decades. Robert was instrumental in bringing hydrogen water to North America. He had the very first reactive tablet in North America to make hydrogen, and this industry is largely built on his work that others have built on, of course, and his initiative in searching for things like this. So I'm pleased to have Robert on this interview with me, and we've known each other for a very long time, Robert, for years. I think you were one of the first 5 people I knew in hydrogen water and who knew about hydrogen water.
Well, let me respond by saying I'm happy to have such a effective and capable person to carry the excellence of the technology of molecular hydrogen into the marketplace.
Thank you.
You're the guy.
Thank you. So basically, for my listeners, my followers, now I've been following, water, a little bit for the last several years, and I've been listening to Robert. He's definitely an expert on, water filtration, water contamination, all of these things. And when he basically recommended this AquaTru system to me, I listened, right? Because Robert, this isn't his system. He has numerous patents, and he said that it's by far the most sophisticated while being the most inexpensive countertop machine he's ever seen. Is that accurate, Robert?
Absolutely accurate. It's I told its original creator and conceiver of the idea that it was perhaps the only RO system I've ever seen, but I'm jealous I didn't have a contribution to it. Even though I ended up having some contribution to it for little improvements, that's all.
Yeah, and I know you've been talking with them and working with them pretty closely the last little while, and you've been in my ear telling me how good it is for quite a long time now, and over time I started listening and thinking about it more and more, and thinking, you know what, I know a lot of people in my life who need this, and I know you and I have talked, and when you've tried to get me to put one in my house for benefits, I've cited, well, like Vancouver drinking water is basically, close to distilled. It's less than 3 ppm TDS. You can't smell any chlorine in it. It's mostly, UV and such. But I mean, the more I think of it, and the more I think about my platform, I think about others who aren't fortunate enough to live where I do with clean drinking water. I even think of, my hometown and my family in Lethbridge, Southern Alberta. I can't drink the water when I go there. I smell the chlorine coming out of the tap, right? It is unpalatable and, possibly hazardous. We still need more information on that. Or when I come down to, Southern California, I just can't drink the water that's coming out of the tap. It's awful. And I go to some communities, like my sister living in Venice, and it comes out like not clear. It's like brownish red and almost has a sewage-like stench to it. And, I know...
You're correct on both counts. It's red because of the deteriorating distribution piping in the city, and it smells like sewage because it's likely, and I'm saying this in jest, but it actually is LA water. Some of it is from recycled sewage, and it's a very advanced technology, but many people in the world now are drinking recycled sewage because the technology can make it quite good, even though the idea isn't good.
Understood. And basically, I started thinking, and especially as we're launching, the essentials with our line here, and I'm writing blogs on things like vitamin D and omega-3 that they're essential, but not everyone needs them. I feel the same way about RO. The more I'm learning about it, is that I should be offering it as an essential for many people like my sister and Venice, people like my mom and grandma and friends and family in southern Alberta, where it reeks of chlorine. I've now been to 9 provinces in Canada and 41 states, and most of the places I found the water pretty unpalatable being used to Vancouver. So it really isn't so much about my personal choice. It's about what I think others could need and should have access to. And I do have an article that's going to coincide with this interview, for all you viewers. Read below on some of the water debates and some of the details, and why perhaps you should be using RO water, and others maybe not so much, or no need. Now, Robert, say a year ago when we were debating things, I was doing my research looking, and then I had concerns about RO systems in general, and a lot of them came from studies throughout the 1990s and such, biofilm accumulation and everything. And you've told me some really cool things about this unit, why it's not pertinent, and why these issues don't exist for the AquaTru.
If we're talking about the biological aspect of purified water, when purified water doesn't have anything to inhibit or disinfect microbial growth for a long time, then that microbial growth, which typically is referred to as heterotrophic plate count, or HPC, this, when it grows to a certain number, it becomes intolerable to the body, and that bacteria becomes opportunistic, they say. And then it can compromise your immune system. So in conventional RO systems, especially ones with sealed tanks that go under the sink and are kind of disappear from the family's awareness, all they know is that there's a faucet on their sink that this super pure water is supposed to come out of, that these tanks can harbor extremely large numbers of bacteria. Not within the first month, not within the second month, but as time goes on and people lose sight of the fact that there is a service responsibility, and when the oil light comes on, it's too late, okay? And they're already, like, health is getting compromised. So I became really aware of this problem. I was really the first person in the RO industry to become aware of the problem. And the industry did not want this to become an issue, like so many things in so many industries. And it was a dirty little secret, so to speak. What exacerbated the problem is that RO membranes, a family drinks, less than 5 gallons. A family of 4 drinks, typically less than 5 gallons a day, okay? But as time went on in the industry, like in the early 70s when I began in the industry, RO membranes made 5 to 6 gallons a day. And people would run out, and sometimes you'd get a call. I ran out, and we would just say, well, just let it fill up again, and you have to wait a little bit. Well, nobody realizes what a great thing it was that they ran out. And I began to realize why it was a great thing. But that 5 to 7 gallon a day membrane became soon a 12 gallon a day membrane, became a 15 gallon a day membrane with technological advances in polymers, became a 24 gallon a day membrane, became a 35 gallon a day membrane. And now the average RO system makes 50 gallons per day, with the family using 5. So this tank never gets emptied, ever. And the water sits in there for months, possibly years. And people do not understand that growth of bacteria can end up causing stomach upsets, It can disturb the microbiome in your child that may have autism, and it can compromise your immune system, especially in the elderly and young infants.
And you're bringing up things that I have 2 points that I think are very important, from what you're saying. And first off, to talk about it, it's not month 1, it's not month 2, it's not month 3. Now, there's something called, in hydrogen technology now, there's something called the International Hydrogen Standards Association. And something important they're doing, because a lot of the technologies to make hydrogen water, a lot of these machines, they may claim a number based on a brand new machine, right? But as scaling happens on the plates, or the system starts breaking down, by the second, third, fourth, or maybe 30th use, they're not making hydrogen anymore. Sometimes none at all, right? Sometimes some of these portable small electrolysis and such machines are broken by the third use, and they just never make hydrogen again. Even some of these super expensive, like $4,000 or $5,000 units, due to no anti-scaling technology, and they started with a low dose of hydrogen, make none, and will never make any again after a month, right? So it's not important. It's not just important to look at the performance stated by the manufacturer, just like say Robert's saying with RO. It's important to look, how does that performance hold up over time, right? And this AquaTru, it's got this small little basin, so water's never sitting accumulating this bacterial growth. And that brings me to the second point, is every year, and we still have so much knowledge that we need on this subject, but every year we're starting to figure out how important bacteria in our body is. For bacteria in our mouth to, our gut and intestines to, everything, right? We've linked. What was that?
The right bacteria.
The right bacteria, right? And that's why when we have no information, it's so dangerous to guess on what to give without the data. But the wrong bacteria in our mouth is now being linked to Alzheimer's, in our gut being linked to Parkinson's disease, and we look at our evolution, and it makes a lot of sense to even look at our mitochondria, the power plants of our cells that actually have different DNA than the rest of our body, that they're kind of just evolved bacteria. And that's a
absolutely
important theory going on. So perhaps bacteria is the most important thing to us, right? So this is important to consider. What was that?
As you well know, there's a heck of a lot more natural bacteria in us than there are cells in our body.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is interesting. It always makes you think. The more you start understanding how our bodies, our physiology works, the weirder it gets. Now, it brings me up to another point. The second biggest knock, or maybe the biggest on RO, has always been taking up the minerals. Now, something we now know is, like everything, you want the right amount of minerals, right? Too little is bad, too much is bad, and that's why we even see debates on things we add to the water, that a certain amount is certainly beneficial, but it gets widespread use, and debate happens. Too much minerals in the water. Magnesium is the most efficient macro mineral in the North American population, but it's one of the ones that can cause adverse events at the lowest dose, right? So it's important to get the right amount. And it's another thing I consider, that we're taking magnesium out of the water, but pretty much everyone who follows us is using hydrogen tablets that is getting bioavailable magnesiums. Now, from your thoughts, what other minerals are we taking out of the water that people should be adding?
Well, let me preface this, is that the entire fake news about minerals prevails. First, there is such a wide variation of minerals in water supplies around the world that to even speak of their value is kind of senseless. Some water supplies, like Seattle, like Vancouver, have so little minerals, it doesn't matter whether they're missing. Their water is almost like RO or distilled water.
And then other locations it's way too high.
And it's way too high and it's objectionable, mostly from a taste standpoint. And there are places that it's so high and exceeds all the standards that it's brackish water and people can't drink it or you get sick on it. But understand that the minerals in water, if you don't have the macro minerals in water, it may not even be a health issue as long as your diet is complete enough. For instance, some of the healthiest populations, some of the blue zones in the world are at high altitudes where basically they're drinking melted snow, okay? The Hunzes and, you know, the famous blue zone populations. So these people typically have very low mineral content water, but their diets are so excellent that it doesn't matter. But what is the most kind of overlooked thing about minerals and water supplies is that we kind of feature macro minerals, calcium, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, iron, etc. But you know, there's the whole periodic table of dietary elements, and you're talking about trace elements. And trace elements are critical, and it never has been completely explored in physiological science because, you know what, there was no money in it, and it was very difficult to research. Studies just couldn't pay off. So we know very little. Most of the real experts in minerals who've written the books and so on say that they consider over 60 dietary elements as essential to human physiology. And that is a big deal. But the macro minerals are they're like 10 macro minerals that maybe you get enough from your food, but you don't get the trace elements anymore because they aren't in the soil anymore and they aren't in your plant that you and the animal you're going to eat consume. So it's a problem. So it's the trace elements even more than the primary ones that are at a key. And I'd say no water supply has adequate trace elements.
Interesting. All right, well, that's good to know. Now, what would you say is the most impressive thing about this AquaTru system? I mean, you've told me 100 things over the last year that you find impressive.
Practical things for people is that it doesn't hook up to anything. It requires no installation. You can have it up and running out of the box in 10 minutes, okay? So that's great. Now, you know, it's problematic, especially for a countertop water appliance of this sophistication, not to connect to water. And it's problematic to connect to water because most connections are to the faucet. And we've all learned in this business that faucets have changed so much. Like now faucets you buy have sprayers on them, okay? And you can't hook to a sprayer. So it invalidates many water systems that have been used for the last 30 years. And this requires no connection, and it's very small, it's transportable. People can use it move it to their RV if they go on a trip. People can give this as a present to their child in college and just put it in the dorm room because, and should I show you?
Yeah, I'd love to see, you know, if you can show us how everything works here.
Are you seeing this unit?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see.
Okay, so I don't know if you realize, or I'm sure your listeners and attendees do not realize, but there are, I'll give you a little side view. There are two containers here.
And if you could move it over maybe 6 inches to you so we can see it on our end a bit better. Yeah, we can see it perfectly here.
It's quite a hefty solid unit, by the way. So there's two containers. And this is the container, the back one, that you put in your water source water, your city water or your well water. And this usually stand up. It has a removable reservoir, and to make it easy, it just was a little too high for me. It has a handle in it. I mean, just clever as all heck. And you fill this with your water source that you want to purify, and you put it here, and it automatically turns on. And I don't know if the electricity is, oh, the switch in the back is off. I assume they would turn it, but I'm going to now turn it on because you leave it on. So this is partially filled, the reservoir that you take out and fill conveniently from your faucet. It can be just used with this very convenient handle. And once you fill it up to the top, just below the handle, you can drop it right back in. And when you do, it automatically senses there is this container of water that needs to be purified. And I don't know if you can hear it, but a very quiet motor turns on and pumps water from here.
I can see some water starting to come out of it too.
You can see this reservoir and how fast it will fill this reservoir in maybe 10 to 15 minutes, okay? So this water is being pumped through this 4-stage. Now, when I pull this off, it automatically turns off the unit because I've exposed the cartridges. So it's turned off now. And these are the stages of RO. And these are, we'll call these cartridges. The first cartridge is called a pre-filter, and that has 2 separate stages in it, 2 different kinds of water treatment, which I'll call sediment removal and chlorine removal. And then the next one is the membrane. And then the next one is the final filter for perhaps the most ominous contaminants that any of which may, some small percentage have even made it through the membrane, like volatile organic chemicals, synthetic chemicals from petroleum and plastic, pesticides, and the newer ones, endocrine disrupting chemicals like pharmaceuticals. Now they're finding almost every drug is in the water.
Some cities like, Seattle and, Toronto, for instance, have even found like illegal drugs like cocaine in the water supplies.
Of course. And there are more contaminants that have been identified in the world's water supply. It's well over 700.
I think they've even found like, some of these, pharmaceutical and illegal drugs, like illegal drugs like cocaine in like salmon populations.
Oh, of course. Antibiotics. And probably the worst thing that's happening is they're with the increased use of psychotic drugs, okay? You're finding these in the water supply because water treatment plants cannot remove them. It's too expensive.
I've got a funny story that I ended up kind of snapping at this company. It was actually a Japanese company that I sent the hydrogen tablets to, and this is like 2 years ago. And they sent it for a water test, right? And it came back with numerous banned substances in the water test. And I looked at the report and they used tap water. And I made them test their tap water. And the banned substances were in the tap water, not the tablet.
Wow. That's very interesting.
And, they were, incredibly apologetic. Right, because obviously the tablets have no banned substance in them, and these weren't like like what an athlete would consider. These were, one was like a drug. It was a drug found in that Voltaren, like a topical application drug that was like found in their water supply, and it just it blew me away.
Personal care products called PCPPs is a category of contaminant that's it's already showing up in water supplies. Everything from lipstick, eyeliner, makeup, cosmetics, shampoos, you name it. Hair coloring are all can be discovered in water supply. So these cartridges make up a 4-stage, very sophisticated RO bottled water plant. And interestingly, if you look at most of the world's bottled water, probably in volume, I would say well over 90% is processed and made by a system that really mimics this. It's an RO system that has 2 stages of pre-filtration, the RO membrane, and post-filter, and that goes into the bottle.
Yeah, and I want to say to everyone watching too, I'm not trying to fearmonger when I say about these water analysis in different cities. The one in Japan, the tests that in the news reports that have come out in Toronto and Seattle. We don't really know. They're such trace amounts. We don't really know if they have an effect yet. So it could be inconsequential, but I know for a lot of people, a few $100 for a countertop RO system is peace of mind. It's easy, and especially for people like, say, my sister in Venice, where her water comes out smelling like sewage, and she drives 20 minutes each way to get these big, 4-gallon jugs of RO water from, a booth in a mall or something, every week. It's just practical, right? But for those of you that maybe can't afford one, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's in my water? I'm poisoning my children. I don't believe that to be true. We have no evidence to suggest that. But for those who want peace of mind and just want better tasting water, I drink that water every time I come to your house in California, and it's great. I don't buy bottled water, and I don't really believe in bottled water. I have to buy it when I'm on the road sometimes because I won't drink the tap. But I just wanted to.
You share this unit. It makes enough for 2 families. So
yeah.
So anyway, these cartridges are something that are replaced, and this electronic measuring device tells you when to replace them. And you just they conveniently twist down or turn down, and you twist them out, bring another one in, and you can change all 3 of these in less than 5 minutes. So that's another aspect of its excellent design.
How often does it need to be switched?
Typically for a family of 4, the number 1 and 3 cartridge.
Yeah.
Typically for a family of 4, a year. And the membrane, 2 years or more.
So you need to spend 5 minutes on maintenance about once every year if you have a family of 4, and if it's a couple, that probably means once every couple of years.
Yeah.
When you say it's an easy system, it's an easy system.
As the front container fills up, you have the choice of dispensing water. There's a button here. You can dispense water from it right while it's sitting. You want to go over and get a glass of water, or convenient for children, you can get a glass right here. Or if you want to go fill your coffee pot, you can just remove this, go over and push the button, and it will come out at a very nice flow rate and fill your coffee pot. One option is to actually have a second one of these. Some people like to drink cold water if they live in hot climates. You can get a second one of these, keep it in your refrigerator, and put the other one back on, in which case it will start again and refill.
Cool. And I want to ask you a question, because I know both you and I have dealt with a lot of water ionizer people in our life, and one of the biggest fallacious claims that they often make to consumers is that their ionizers are the most powerful water filters in the world, and you pay this $4,000 or $5,000 for the ionizer, and even if you don't believe in their pH claims, their scam claims, or their or the hydrogen, which is usually inconsequential in them, they say that it's the best water filter on the planet. Now, how do those water filters stack up to this, which is
information? Most ionizers have just a carbon filter of some variety, and because most of them are made in Asia, they also use unconventional things like you know, everything from gemstones to various crystalline media that doesn't have a lot of, I mean, it doesn't purify the water. They claim it imparts energies to the water and so on. But I mean, this isn't like, you know, real science of purification. So they're very weak purification devices because it's basically adsorptive media like activated carbon, which this incorporates into it, but nothing at the level of an RO membrane. Now, ionizers, interestingly, are often, because of the reason you gave before, when contaminants build up on the electrolytic plates of ionizers, they tend to just stop making hydrogen, okay? And so where the buildup is likely to be very significant, ionizer companies recommend that you actually put an RO system before the ionizer to protect the electrolytic plates.
Which ironically, you know, removes the, you know, the solids you need in the water to create the hydrogen in the first place, because if you pump RO water through the plates, the hydrogen won't be dissolved and made.
They incorporate a special dispenser. You put in
salts that might add like a few, you know, ppm.
Enough to get the electricity flowing. Yeah.
It's a interesting little setup of inefficiency they have going on. But I wanted to address that because I've heard it hundreds of times that at the very least the ionizers are the best water filter, and everything I've read and researched has found that to be false. And talking to you, a true expert on this subject, you just kind of shrug your shoulders and you say, no, they're wrong. You know, and usually it's not even the company saying that, it's their salesmen who make commission that say this.
So one of the things that's easy to do for people who are very conscious or bacteria, always scared of bacteria, this, if someone wants to sanitize this, it's the easiest thing in the world to sanitize, because you just remove the top, put in a cap full of hydrogen peroxide, okay, when it's full, and you can stir it around, and 5 minutes later, dump it, and you've just got basically as close to sterile tank as you want. Now, I've only done this in 2.5 years. I've only done this 2 times, just kind of to experiment with it myself. But because this is used so much, you don't have this microbial problem.
Yeah, it's just constantly flowing and leaving the water, right? We all know the difference between, you know, a still water source, even after a few days it starts to stink, and, you know, flowing rivers and creeks that do not have that problem. Is there any other, you know, parting points you want to mention about the AquaTru? I know I'm impressed with it and everything you've been teaching me the last year.
I think it's remarkable for its user friendliness, its ease of installation. You don't have to pay somebody $150 to install it. Its ease of service, its freedom from having to be disinfected by a professional technician, which rarely even happens. And the fact that this device produces water as pure as the best of bottled waters, and it removes virtually every contaminant category, from endocrine disruptors to disinfection byproducts, to pharmaceuticals, to personal care products, to heavy metals, etc. There's nothing it really leaves out.
And I mean, so to recap, this system is far less expensive, far less maintenance, easy, no headache, and works as well, if not better, than a lot of the more expensive. Yeah, so I mean, I can see why, despite not inventing it, you're you know, putting your own name behind it, right? And that's actually, you know, I've got a lot of respect for that as well, that you say, hey, this is the best machine. I want to get this out there. So, Robert, it's always a pleasure. You know, thank you so much for your time today, and I'm sure I'll be emailing you more questions on all of this and can be adding it to the page for our readers in the future.
Ask your audience for questions. I'm happy to field them.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I know you are. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.